In today's video, we'll be taking a look at one of the most intense and disturbing battles of the Vietnam War. There will be graphic combat footage and images from Vietnam throughout this video, so viewers' discretion is advised. But with that being said, let's get right into it. John Caviani joined the United States Army in 1969. He was originally deemed unfit because he had a severe allergy to bee stings, but thankfully he was eventually able to persuade an army doctor to fill out the paperwork allowing him to enlist. Caviani started boot camp at age 26 and quickly volunteered to join the Special Forces, training as a medic. He was sent to Vietnam in 1970 with Task Force 1 Vietnam Training Advisory Group, which later became known as the Military Advisory Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, otherwise known as MACV SOG, the top secret elite reconnaissance unit. If you are unfamiliar with MACV SOG, it was an elite reconnaissance unit during the Vietnam War, primarily made up of Navy SEALs, Green Berets, and Air Commandos. These small MACV SOG teams were sent deep behind enemy lines on some of the most daring and dangerous missions of the war. When Caviani arrived in the country, he was first assigned as an agriculture advisor and veterinarian because of his background. However, he wanted to do more, so he switched to reconnaissance for a few months before volunteering to become a platoon leader. His unit's mission was to provide security for an isolated radio relay site called Hickory Hill, north of Khe Sanh Combat Base, which was located within enemy territory near the edge of the demilitarized zone. There weren't many men left to defend the hill when Caviani arrived. Roughly about a dozen American Special Forces advisors and about 70 indigenous soldiers. When Caviani arrived at the camp, it was a disaster, just waiting to be knocked over. Him and the team had to fix it up and fortify the area to make it easier to defend in case of an attack. And it's a good thing they did so, because Caviani had only been at Hickory Hill for about a month when the actions that defined his career took place. On the morning of June 4th, 1971, the young staff sergeant woke up to find the entire camp under fire from a large enemy force. Without regard for his own safety, he put himself in harm's way several times to move around the camp's perimeter to rally and direct the platoon's return fire, using any weapon he could find to join them. Eventually, it became clear that they couldn't keep up the fight, so they were ordered to evacuate. Caviani and another Special Forces soldier, Sergeant John R. Jones, helped evacuate the men into helicopters. Most of the platoon were able to make it out, but Caviani and Jones stayed behind to destroy the site's sensitive equipment so it wouldn't fall into enemy hands. The pair was forced to stay overnight at the site with a handful of Montagnard soldiers who remained with them. They strengthened their defenses as best they could before the enemy launched another major ground attack in the morning. Caviani returned a heavy barrage of small arms and grenade fire, but was unable to slow the enemy down. He ordered the remaining men to escape, then grabbed a machine gun, stood on top of the bunker that was covering him, and swept machine gun fire across the enemy soldiers headed their way. Caviani was hit several times while on top of the bunker, but thanks to his bravery, the other men, with exception of Jones, were able to escape. The staff sergeant then tried to grab Jones out of the bunker, but the enemy had overrun the top of the hill by then, and him and Jones were trapped inside. Caviani and Jones were able to take out 2 enemy soldiers who came into the bunker, but not before more North Vietnamese were alerted to their presence. Another enemy soldier threw a grenade inside the bunker, which seriously injured Jones. Jones then said to Caviani, "I'm going to surrender." He then got up and walked out of the bunker, but unfortunately, he cursed to the Vietnamese soldiers in Vietnamese, and they immediately shot and killed him. And before Kaviani even had time to react to seeing his friend die, another hand grenade came rolling into the bunker. Kaviani quickly kicked the grenade to the other side of the bunker under their radio, and it went off. It took out the radio, so that was the last time anyone was able to hear from Kaviani. He then played dead as the enemy soldiers came into the bunker to see if there were any survivors. Thankfully, the enemy soldiers didn't notice he was still alive, but when they left the bunker, they set it on fire, so Kaviani had to get out of there quickly. He managed to make it out of the door, but he had burning tar going down his face and arms and back. And as he squirms his way out of the bunker on fire, somehow his machine gun goes off and shoots him in the head. Thankfully, he was wearing a steel helmet, the only time in the entire war he had decided to actually wear one of those helmets. Thankfully, the shot didn't kill him because of that helmet, but it did knock him out. When he came to sometime later, he crawled into an adjacent bunker and tried to hide under a bed. He then passed out. But when he woke up, an enemy soldier was playing with his boot, likely trying to get it off of his feet to steal the boots off of what he thought was a dead man. Kaviani continued to play dead, and thankfully his boots must have been on real tight because the enemy soldier just gave up and walked out of the bunker. Kaviani then did a nice low crawl over to the door and out of the bunker, and then made his way into the jungle where he disappeared. He then spent about 11 days hiding in the jungle, and he made it to Firebase Fuller, about 42 kilometers away. He had no weapons and was badly wounded, with about 100 different shrapnel wounds and bullet holes. He didn't realize the area was surrounded by North Vietnamese, who quickly captured him. Kaviani then spent nearly 2 years as a prisoner of war before being returned to the U.S. in 1973 during Operation Homecoming. Kaviani was believed to have been killed in action when he was recommended for the Medal of Honor. Officials learned later that he was still alive. The 31-year-old staff sergeant received the nation's highest medal for valor during a White House ceremony on December 12, 1974. Kaviani said he debated leaving the military after he recovered, but he decided to stay in the army, and he eventually ended up in Delta Force, serving in Berlin and working in counterterrorism before he retired as a sergeant major in May of 1990. After retirement, Kaviani went to culinary school and married his wife Barbara in 1992. As for the Medal of Honor, Kaviani was not fond of being in such an elite club. In 2002, he said he spent a long time trying to forget about Vietnam. Then you get this medal, and now all of a sudden it's public knowledge. However, he carried the responsibility with grace, traveling the country as a motivational speaker and appearing at veterans events, as well as teaching children about Vietnam War history. He also served as a regional director of the Congressional Medal of Honor Society for a time. In 2011, he was inducted into the Special Forces Hall of Fame. That same year, 40 years after the battle he would never forget, Kaviani returned to Vietnam. This time, it was in search of the remains of Sergeant Jones, the man who was there with him during the ordeal but didn't survive. Up until that point, Jones's body had not been recovered, but thankfully, Kaviani managed to find his remains and brought him home. Jones was then buried in Arlington National Cemetery in 2012 during a ceremony that Kaviani attended. Less than 2 years later, on July 29, 2014, Kaviani passed away of a bone marrow disorder at the age of 70. He He is buried in Arlington National Cemetery near Jones and other fallen Vietnam veterans. If you guys want to see the raw, unedited combat footage from this video, I'll have a link down in the description below where you can see all of the clips that were too graphic for YouTube's community guidelines. And if you thought this story was absolutely insane, you have got to hear this next one popping up on screen right here. But thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I will see you all in the next one.